Disaster can strike anywhere. Are you prepared? A guide to emergency management for the city of Prince George. Welcome, residents of Prince George. It's great to have so many of you here today. It's obvious with the turnout that there is a real interest in emergency preparedness and management in this beautiful city we call Prince George. Before we begin today, I would ask that if at any time you have a question or concern regarding the material presented, that you simply raise your hand and we will address you. Just quickly, by a show of hands, how many of you have ever been affected by an emergency or disaster? Yes, we probably all have. I am certain that if we all think back, we can recall a time when an emergency or even a disaster has touched our lives. With that being said, an emergency or disaster can occur at any time and without warning. Right here, right now, can you confidently say that you and your family are truly prepared? Today's presentation will not only address your readiness as a resident, but will also focus on Prince George as a collective community. Before we get into the specifics of emergency preparedness and response, let's take a quick look at Prince George's brimming history. For generations, this area has been Lheidli T'enneh First Nations territory. Europeans began settling over 200 years ago. Explorer Simon Fraser set up Fort George as a fur trading post in 1807. As the town developed and grew, the Grand Trunk Pacific Railway was built and created yet another link to the West Coast. Just 1 year later, the city of Prince George was born. Being located in a heavily forested area, the settling Europeans focused on farming and forestry as the main industries for revenue and sustenance. As the city developed, many new lumber, pulp and paper mills were built. Fast forwarding to more modern times, the University of Northern British Columbia was established, opening in 1994. Since its incorporation, Prince George has evolved into the thriving city that we all enjoy today. Its contribution to the province and to Canada is vast and well recognized. As I am certain most of you will recall, Prince George has had its share of emergencies and disasters. But what is an emergency, and how do we define it? An emergency is any unplanned event that can cause structural damage to a building, a complex, or even a dwelling from, say, a tornado. Environmental damage, an oil spill or hazardous chemical release from a train derailment. Financial damage, loss of revenue due to business interruption, maybe from a fire. Injuries, citizens who have incurred injuries from a bomb blast. Deaths, loss of life due to major explosions, fires, weather disasters. In 1999, a record was set for the largest snowfall in one day. I am certain we all remember that and the impact that single event had on not only our own lives, but for the city as well. Now, while that event was environmental and unpredictable, man-made hazards were and still are a trigger for emergencies and disasters. As we have seen in 2006, sulfur dioxide was accidentally released in the Marsilex plant. Then, in only a year's time, a train derailment and a fire. Almost within the same year, Prince George was hit with an ice jam and a flood. Nature sure can be deadly. Then in 2008, phew, can we catch a break here? There is another fire. Fast forward to 2012, where the Lakeland Mills explosion happened. And only a few short years later, we all know about the wildfires and how devastating they were. Wow, what a history of events! Let's take a look at emergency management. What is emergency management and what is its goal? Well, the goal of emergency management is to simply ensure the public safety. This is a combined effort from a number of resources and agencies, usually led by a city's emergency manager. The City of Prince George has an emergency manager. His job is to coordinate with police, fire, ambulance, public officials, the province, and a host of other entities to develop specific emergency management plans. These plans include, but are not limited to, prevention, mitigation, response, and recovery. Prevention planning is the most important and usually includes the use of safety protocols aimed at stopping an undesired event from occurring. Event mitigation focuses on minimizing the effects or the consequences of an event. Sandbagging for floods or following building codes during construction to prevent the quick spread of fire through a building are examples. Emergency response usually employs some sort of action from police, fire, ambulance, or a coordinated effort by all three. Example, a major multi-car accident on a busy highway. Recovery efforts may also include first responders, but can also include city workers, insurance companies, construction companies, military. The emergency manager further focuses on key elements of the city, such as the community. Emergency managers examine demographics to ascertain the most vulnerable and ensure resources are designated to assist them, such as our nursing homes here in Prince George. Potential hazards. Through a variety of assessments, emergency managers can identify hazards that are both frequent and heavily consequential. Infrastructure. Emergency managers identify buildings or structures that may be at risk of certain threats and work with property stakeholders to mitigate those threats. Critical infrastructure. Prince George has many critical infrastructure elements important to the community. These include, but are not limited to, gas lines, hydro stations, water plants. Now that we know what emergency management is, why is it so important? Well, simply put, emergency management works to protect the individual and the collective community, people, and property. Emergency management is also important because it gives us direction in times of crises. Plans tell us what to do. People, for the most part, are not used to functioning under the stress of an actual emergency or disaster. Emergency management makes sense of what has to occur and provides us direction. Thus far, we have examined what emergency management is and why it is important. Now, as residents of this beautiful city, we're going to focus on our responsibilities during an emergency or disaster. Yes, indeed, these are our responsibilities. First, know the risks. What could happen? How could this affect me and my family? Second, make a plan. Ensure you and your loved ones know what to do in different scenarios. Number 3, collect resources and goods. Put together a kit, preferably an assortment of items that will sustain life for at least 72 hours. Let's take a look at these 3 steps closer. What are some risks you may encounter? Well, in Prince George, the risks we face are wildfire, hazardous materials spills, floods, severe storms, critical infrastructure failure, industrial accidents, outbreaks of diseases, zombies, and yes, even the possibility of a terrorist attack. As emergency management professionals, we are continuously aware of the dangers around us, and you should as well. Of course, you should not be afraid all of the time, but simply just be aware and be prepared. Next, make a plan. When you are making an emergency plan, there are several things you can do to better prepare yourself, such as make a map of your house, designate a safe room, establish escape exits, make sure your fire extinguishers are up to date, not expired. Ensure you know where the water, gas shutoff valves are located. Ensure your electric panels are secure. Make certain flood drains are unobstructed. Write down a list of these contacts and include them into your plan. Family doctor, utility providers, out-of-area contacts, neighbors, school daycare, emergency service. Information for a backup person you have selected to pick up your children. Information about family pets. Ensure your children are properly looked after by packing an envelope in their backpack containing emergency information. Such information should include your name and phone number, your backup person's name and phone number, a family photo and a photo of the backup person with the names on the back, any health or special needs information. It would also be appropriate to discuss with your child's school or daycare about their or your emergency plan. Establish a safe zone or designated meeting areas for you and your family, whether it be at a family member's house or even the local Tim Hortons. A designated meeting spot will be helpful in case of separation. To ensure you are ready anytime to activate your emergency plan, it's best to practice your plan regularly. Emergencies can happen on a smaller scale as well, so it is good to check if your household smoke alarms and carbon dioxide detectors are working. Keeping copies of your emergency plan in all of your emergency kits is also a good practice. Now for the 72-hour kit. As indicated earlier, a 72-hour kit is a must-have. It should include items such as important papers, blankets, water and food, batteries, candles, and you can read the rest there. At the end of this presentation, you will all receive a brochure highlighting items that should be included in your kit. Located within your vehicle, you should always have a full first aid kit, a blanket, a whistle, a fire extinguisher, hazard indicators, booster cables, road maps, additional fluids. Always have at least a half full tank of gas. On that note, this brings us to the conclusion of our presentation. Thank you for being such a wonderful audience. Please make sure you all check out Prepared BC. It is an amazing website with plenty of emergency preparedness material. If there are any further questions, please let us know. Thank you.